In a warehouse the size of a soccer field, under artificial light and the silence of refrigerated corridors, dozens of steel containers begin to hum, not with engines, but with life. Inside them, ancient mussels wait. Rows of alligators, each one weighing up to 300 kilos, lie in controlled stillness. There is no shouting, no struggle, just sensors pulsing like the heartbeat of a machine made of reptiles and restraint systems. This is not fiction. It is the start of a logistical operation that quietly moves over 120,000 live alligators every year, across highways, across oceans, across hemispheres, for ecological relocation, for zoological programs, for the global market in regulated leather. And behind every successful shipment lies something more than brute containment. There is engineering, there is thermodynamics, there is a science of balance, pressure, and time. Transporting a living mass with jaws strong enough to crush bone requires more than cages. It demands containment systems with the intelligence of a naval dry dock, structures that can hold enormous, reactive forces without triggering collapse. In dry docks, ships are held not by strength, but by the calibration of water, air, and ballast. The same principle applies here. Each crate that carries these reptiles is designed with adjustable restraints that behave more like suspension bridges than cages, absorbing tension, distributing weight, reacting to micro-movements. The margin of error, often less than a centimeter. In the language of logistics, these aren't animals. They're dynamic biological volumes, each one a biomechanical challenge that must remain stable through heat, turbulence, and time. But temperature adds another layer of risk. Unlike mammals or fish, alligators are ectothermic. They don't regulate their own body temperature. Their comfort zone floats between 26 and 32 degrees Celsius. Below that, metabolic dormancy begins. Above it, stress spirals toward toxicity. So the thermal strategy for this cargo can't rely on simple refrigeration. It needs something else. A cold chain built not just to chill, but to simulate a controlled ecosystem, second by second. This is where technology meets biology. In recent years, specialized crate linings began using phase change materials inspired by natural amphibian skin, substances that buffer internal temperatures without the need for constant power, adapting like artificial epidermis to shield the reptiles during long transits, especially across climate zones. The result isn't just cooling. It's preservation of life through thermodynamic mimicry. To grasp the complexity, imagine a cross-section. On one side, a naval ballast tank designed to carry thousands of tons of liquid without destabilizing the ship. On the other, a modular alligator crate built to carry a single animal with irregular weight distribution, muscle reflex, and temperature sensitivity. And yet, both are governed by the same logic: pressure distribution, volume modulation, dynamic stability. The same laws that keep a freighter afloat are now used to move reptiles across continents. Florida and Brazil are at the center of this operation. Together, they export over 120,000 live alligators annually. What many see as just wildlife is, in reality, a living system of economic, ecological, and industrial connections. One that depends on silent machinery, precise temperature sensors, muscle tension nets, and logistic routes modeled with the precision of satellite-guided agriculture. It's not about power. It's about equilibrium. Before the trucks roll, before the planes lift off, before the destination is reached, this system must work like a mechanical equation, perfectly balanced, constantly adjusting, and invisibly alive. Moving alligators is not about taming a beast. It's about understanding a biological engine and designing the world around it. Because when the cargo fights back, or shuts down, or overheats, the entire chain collapses. But when it works, it becomes something else entirely. A transport operation, with the logic of a heartbeat. In the early stages of alligator export, restraint was synonymous with security. Straps, locks, pressure points, everything tightened to immobilize the animal. The logic seemed simple: less movement, less risk. But biology doesn't follow human logic. Deep inside the musculature of a restrained alligator, a silent rebellion begins. When tension is applied beyond the animal's natural posture, muscle fibers lose access to oxygen. Anaerobic respiration takes over. Lactic acid builds up. What starts as protection becomes internal sabotage. The result: lactic acidosis, a physiological chain reaction that drains energy, impairs recovery, and ironically makes the animal more aggressive once released. The tighter the hold, the more unstable the outcome. For years, this problem remained invisible. High mortality rates were blamed on temperature, fatigue, or unknown stressors. Until motion sensors, the kind originally developed for military K9 deployment units, were adapted for use in reptile crates. The breakthrough came with the invention of passive tension nets, elastic restraints that adjust grip in real time, responding to even the subtlest shift in movement. Instead of forcing the animal into stillness, these systems readjust constantly, maintaining optimal tension zones, a concept closer to exoskeleton engineering than to cages. The crate stops acting like a prison. It becomes a dynamic stabilizer, like the suspension system of a heavy-duty vehicle on uneven terrain. And the data followed. In Louisiana, 2022, trials using motion-responsive restraint systems showed a dramatic change. Mortality during transport dropped from 6.2% to 1.4% in the first 90 days alone. The animals arrived calmer, less injured, with better muscular response during release. The difference wasn't in the route, or the temperature, or the speed, but in how the crate adapted to the body it was carrying. Restraint, redefined by responsiveness. Meanwhile, in the Brazilian state of Mato Grosso, a new layer of intelligence entered the field: infrared-triggered pulse mapping. Instead of waiting for visible distress, exporters began tracking changes in thermal and circulatory patterns during transport. Sensors embedded in crate lining read stress indicators through subtle changes in skin temperature and vascular response. In one instance, during an unexpected heatwave in 2023, a convoy rerouted mid-route after stress readings indicated early signs of system failure. Emergency hydration and controlled deceleration were deployed. Over 300 animals were saved from collapse, not by force, but by listening to data. Because transporting a giant reptile isn't about suppressing its instinct. It's about working with it, understanding how its muscles store energy, how tension becomes trauma, how movement can be a signal, not a threat. That's why, in the latest generation of containment, the focus isn't on control. It's on elasticity, responsiveness, feedback. The modern crate is less like a cage and more like a conversation between machine and animal. One expert said it best: "You don't control an alligator with force. You neutralize it with elastic intelligence and constant biofeedback." In that sentence lies the principle of this entire operation. It's not power that moves the system forward. It's understanding under pressure. Inside the crate, the alligator breathes slowly. The muscles are still. The jaw rests, but the threat remains dormant, hidden not in movement, but in temperature. Alligators are ectothermic. Their body doesn't heat itself. They depend entirely on the thermal environment around them. In logistical terms, this makes them among the most vulnerable live cargoes on Earth. A drop of just 2 or 3 degrees below 24 degrees C can push them into metabolic dormancy. A spike above 34 degrees C triggers a stress cascade, releasing cortisol, raising blood pressure, and, if prolonged, leading to neurological failure. They don't scream. They don't panic. They shut down. And that makes it even harder to detect when the system is failing. Traditional cooling systems, refrigerated trucks, ventilated containers, ice buffers work well for fish, meat, even mammals. But with reptiles, temperature is not just an environmental condition. It's a survival envelope defined not by ambient air, but by skin contact and conductive exchange. That's where innovation stepped in. Engineers began lining transport crates with hybrid phase change materials, inspired by biomimetic gel technology. These linings don't just absorb heat or cold, they respond to it. Buffering temperature swings up to 10 degrees C, creating a microclimate that remains stable even as the environment shifts wildly outside. But the fragility of this equation became clear in 2021. A shipment of alligators left the Pantanal for the US in what seemed like safe conditions. Ambient temperature, 28 degrees. Cargo ventilation, operational. Yet by morning, 22 animals were lost. The cause, not external heat, but internal conduction. The aluminum structure of the crate had absorbed nighttime cool air and radiated it back into the animal's underside, creating localized cold stress. From outside, nothing appeared wrong, but thermally, the crates became silent hazards, proof that surface material, not just air temperature, could be fatal. To counter this, thermal engineering had to become more granular. In Mississippi, a team tested tri-zone containers with active feedback loops. Each section of the crate could independently adjust temperature based on real-time readings from embedded dermal sensors. Internal fans would reroute airflow, thermal gel packets would trigger or retreat, and exterior insulation would shift density based on solar exposure. For 12 weeks, across multiple trips, they recorded 0 fatalities. Not because conditions were ideal, but because control was intelligent. There is no shortcut in reptile logistics. Every crate, every truck, every minute in transit is a negotiation between heat, biology, and technology. One mistake is enough. One delay. One cold floor. One overheated patch of metal. Because in this operation, the margin between survival and collapse is invisible and always moving. The challenge is not to keep the crate cold. The challenge is to make the crate think. As one thermal engineer described it, temperature isn't what the air reads, it's what the animal's skin absorbs. How close is your crate's surface to your cargo's death point? In that question lies the heart of this chapter. The cold chain is not a box, it's a skin, a system that must act with the awareness of the life it carries. And for the alligator, survival isn't loud, it's silent, it's conductive, it's thermodynamic. The image of an alligator inside a modular crate might seem like a curiosity, but behind it lies a lesson in logistics that extends far beyond reptiles. Because moving 10,000 dynamically unstable biological units, each with its own thermal threshold, muscle reflex, and behavioral unpredictability, demands a level of coordination that rivals the most advanced supply chains in modern agriculture. What's at stake isn't just survival. It's the future of biosensitive transport, where the cargo isn't inert, but alive, aware, and reactive. The transport system must therefore behave not like a box, but like an extension of the organism it carries. This same logic applies to high-value livestock, precision dairy, and long-haul genetic material transport. In each case, the challenge is not containment. It is orchestration. A choreography of sensors, materials, climate zones, and kinetic modeling, designed not just to prevent death, but to maintain optimal biological state throughout the journey. In agricultural mechanics, that means integrating the unpredictability of life into machines built for predictability. It means designing for fluctuation, not despite it, but because of it. In 2022, a flood swept through a crocodile farm in Limpopo, South Africa. The response? A fleet of amphibious containers, ventilated, heat-resistant, reinforced, each one guided by drone-mapped topography and real-time weather algorithms. Over 5,000 Nile crocodiles were evacuated, some by barge, others by off-road vehicle, in under 48 hours. No casualties. The lesson? Extreme logistics requires anticipatory design. It requires systems that model not just the cargo, but the environment, the trajectory, the failure points. That operation didn't just move reptiles. It rewrote how emergency agro-transport could function under pressure. The implications go beyond animal transport. They touch grain storage in volatile climates, flower shipments across equators, seed preservation in conflict zones. Because once logistics adapts to life, to pulse, to reaction, it can adapt to anything. We stop thinking in terms of containers and start thinking in terms of environmental capsules, adaptive spaces, mobile ecosystems that shield, regulate, and respond. It is not a crate, it is a habitat in motion. That's why experts today are advocating for a shift in classification. These aren't dangerous goods. They are dynamically unstable biological masses, governed by real-time biofeedback, modular engineering, and predictive sensing. Moving them requires the same systems thinking used in aerospace or deep-sea recovery: flexibility, precision, resilience, and above all, respect for the living variables inside every equation. Because if it's possible to move 10,000 giant reptiles across countries without blood, without breakdown, without loss, then it's possible to redesign any agrologistic system on Earth to make it smarter, more adaptive, more alive. The future of agriculture doesn't just depend on what we grow. It depends on how we move, what breathes. And in that silent movement, guided by sensors and intelligence, lies a new kind of progress. One that respects the pulse inside the crate and the system that dares to carry it. Would you trust a crate to think for you? Comment 1 if this tech made you rethink how wild agro-transport can be.